Hi again everybody. The other day I posted a question on both my Facebook pages, which was Chris Halton and Haunted Earth UK. Have you any questions you would like to ask me, particularly concerning my work? And I was quietly surprised and pleased at the response that I received. Quite a few questions were posted on those pages, as well as personal messages which were sent to me. Now, I can't really deal with each individual question because many of you touch base on similar issues and questions of me, so I will try and generalise and answer as many of the points that were raised by you, and hopefully that will satisfy your curiosity. The first point I would like to cover is many questions I received on this particular one is how I support myself in my work. Am I a full-time paranormal investigator? And the answer is yes, I am a full-time paranormal investigator. I have my own income streams which allows me to continue with this work. And of course, I would say in my time as a paranormal investigator, I probably spend 80% of my life editing video captured from investigations, and probably 10% actually investigating paranormal activity, and the rest of the time being tied up with driving to and from locations. Quite often, as you'll see from some of my work, I've actually gone to places during the daytime. The reason for that is simply I have a love of European history, and particular English history and culture, and I like to share these historic buildings with you and to give you a taste of what Old England really looks like, and not the generalised view that people see from across the world of what they imagine Britain to be. Now, the reason I do the daytime investigations, apart from that, is because many of these buildings would not grant me access at night, and so I have to make do with what I can get. And in the circumstances, the daytime investigations seem to be the best option. And of course, daytime is not necessarily the best time. I prefer working at night, but in these places, occasionally I pick up some relatively good EVP, and of course, it allows me to develop my skills as a cameraman and director on the footage that I'm capturing, which I can share with you. I take a certain degree of pride in what I'm actually doing. And I know that I'm not perfect in what I do, but I'm hoping to push forward and eventually get to that point, shall we say. So most of my work is tied up with the paranormal, and very little of my time is actually spent doing anything else, which for me is a sad aspect of my life, I suppose, because there are many other things that I would like to do. But for the moment, I enjoy doing this in the way that I'm doing it, and perhaps that will never stop. But I certainly enjoy sharing information with you captured from investigations. Now, many of you have asked me, on the kind of footage that I capture, how do I communicate with spirit? And that is a long story, but essentially, I meditate for roughly an hour before I go anywhere, just to loosen up and open myself to spiritual energies. And when I get there, I just allow that as a continuum throughout the investigation to try and chill. That is very important. But again, with nighttime investigations, it has its problems, and those problems can be, for example, people turning up unexpectedly, wanted to know what we were actually doing. And of course, I believe on one of my investigations at the Haunted Airfield, there is such an example of that. Sometimes the police arrive and want everybody off site. I haven't actually been physically stopped by the police, but I'm aware of the civil laws of trespass. And unfortunately, most of the nighttime investigations are going to be a civil trespass. Because in the early days of Haunted Earth, I used to do the right thing and approach the owners. And in many cases, sometimes through perhaps their own religious bigotry, they would accuse me of being a devil worshipper or something similar, which is completely ludicrous. Or they would want to charge me an astronomical sum of money to go to that particular location. One place in particular, it's an old mansion which is literally falling apart, and they wanted £2,000. So from that moment onwards, I decided that if I wanted to catch footage, I would never break into an occupied dwelling or into a house per se, but most of the places I go to are abandoned buildings. And so I've discovered that going to these type of locations generates more activity, principally because these places are very rarely visited by the living. And it's a little bit, to use an analogy, of like going into a house which previously had a dog and no one's been in there for 6 months, and you walk through the door and the fleas jump at you. And that's exactly the same with the paranormal. You go into these places and the activity just suddenly generates itself. But the key to that, as I discovered, was minimum numbers. The fewer you take with you, the better chance of success. And most of the groups that I've seen advertised on YouTube and on Facebook tend to have something in excess of 9 or 10 members, which is how we were originally. But to be honest, it's a complete failure, because if you turn up with that number of people, it's very unlikely that you're going to pick up much paranormal activity. The paranormal, for what it is, prefers minimal numbers, and I think that perhaps more than 4 people at a location is too much of a distraction, and that has some kind of impact upon the type of activity you're likely to capture. What I'm hoping to do with my work, as you're aware, is to be able to share it to a much wider platform by making a TV pilot. And the pilot is 3/4 of the way through to completion, and hopefully will be ready in the next few weeks. I don't actually go to any ticketed investigations, generally speaking, because of the large number of people that are likely to turn up. And for me, it's just a complete waste of time. But of course, when I first became involved in the paranormal, I actually started with a few of these ticketed events to go along and also to join in. And it was a great grounding experience for me. But as I got much deeper into my subject, I've realised that this thing is much bigger than I previously anticipated to be, that there is so much to understand and so much to share, that I decided to go my own way, and that's where I am at the moment. Each and every one of the videos that I actually present may be filmed by team members, but the editing, the narration, in fact the whole package is entirely down to me, and so of course it becomes a full-time job. But I'm glad that many of you enjoy my work and what I'm trying to achieve. And so that's why I'm sat here now for you to try and answer a few more questions. Quite a common question is, how can I see paranormal activity? How do I feel it? Well, what I actually sense when I walk, as an example, if I walk into a building, imagery suddenly appears in my mind. It shows people in period costumes sometimes, or other times it may just be words that just pass through my mind, totally disconnected words with my own conscious thoughts. These are things that just float into my mind where I have not previously given them any consideration. So it's spontaneous, and as I feel these things, I explain what I can see. And when I say see with inverted commas, because it's, if you like, a third eye manifestation, these images appear in my mind. And occasionally I pick up names and also more detail about their background. But I'm generally speaking more empathic than anything else, because I can feel their emotional status. I can feel if they're happy or angry, and I can feel their energy. People say, how can you feel an energy like that? And it's just a sensation that you walk into a particular room and you can feel it. It's an intensity that has no kind of physicality, but you can feel it. It's almost like an electric tension in the atmosphere. Sometimes it feels very pleasant, other times it doesn't. And then, of course, once you've felt it, you've connected with it, and then it leads on to other things. Now, people have asked me, am I frightened when I go onto an investigation? To be honest, I'm not. I suppose I've spent many years being in the police, working late at night on my own, and you tend to get used to the darkness. However, it's fair to say that I personally would never go into a haunted location on my own, and always prefer to take somebody with me. Because I find that if you're there and you are the sole focus of attention, then things sometimes can become too much of a distraction for me, and invariably end up abandoning that investigation. So I never go on my own at night. I always take a friend or colleague with me. What have I actually seen in my experiences? I have seen full-bodied manifestations. I have seen partial manifestations. I have seen ectoplasmic energy quite commonly. And when I'm shooting at night, people have noticed that I'm picking up on activity. So what can I see in total darkness that they cannot see, except with a camcorder perhaps? Well, most people are cotton on to the fact that energy, to most people's eyes, in total darkness appears as red dots or flashes of energy. And occasionally, particularly on filmed investigations, you'll see that I clearly identify to the camera orb activity flashing past me. Now, that type of orb activity I see as grey flashes, and I know that if I see a grey flash, it's going to appear on camera. Red flashes, generally speaking, don't. And yet I found by using a CCTV rig up, that quite often shows that activity. So I think that our biggest problem today is lack of technological advances. I know a lot of people are bringing out new equipment all of the time, but the problem with the paranormal, it has no set rules. There is no standard. Wherever you go, everything can be totally different from the last investigation, and what was a commonality of purpose in one place becomes the complete opposite in another. And that is the real difficulty. And of course, equipment to try and capture that type of activity is coming along, but not fast enough. And I'm hoping perhaps in maybe 10 or 15 years, our knowledge and understanding using technical equipment to achieve this will be more greatly advanced. Most of my equipment I actually use are old analog camcorders. The reason I've chosen them rather than mini DV or HD camcorders or whatever the HD, DVD camcorders or whatever is being offered on the market, they have very poor infrared illumination, whereas the older analog cams project a lot of IR light coupled with powerful illuminators. It allows us to completely light up one location and capture all of the activity that's occurring there. So yeah, for me that is a bonus. But with regard to other equipment, for example EMF, electromagnetic field detectors, yeah, they can work fine on occasions, but then I've been to other places where there is clearly an activity taking place in front of me and they've not registered any indication of that activity. So I, generally speaking, tend to rely more on my senses rather than on anything else at the moment. Okay, I've given a description of the kind of things I've seen, and the most common manifestation, apart from the red flashes I've described to you, is what I call the coat hanger effect. I quite often see spiritual presences in human form as a shadow, but shaped like a coat hanger, the side of a coat hanger. I can't say that much of that appears on camera, because it doesn't. But certainly on a few locations I've been to, I've been able to track the activity and follow it because I can actually see it. And I also feel the deeper I get into this subject, my awareness and understanding of this grows stronger each day. So every time I go to an event somewhere, I know that my senses generally will be a lot sharper than they were previously, and this is a bonus. Now, I don't think I have any particular special gifts as far as paranormal investigation goes. I think everybody can achieve this. The only problem is you've got to open up to it, open up to this energy. And I think with a lot of people there is a self-generated fear about the paranormal, and really there shouldn't be. The paranormal, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people who have lost the use of their bodies. They are now in spirit. Their bodies have ceased to be. Somebody referred to them once to me as suits, and I think that's probably the best way you can describe our bodies. They go through a phase, they wear out, and they die. Now, where do we go to from there is another question that's been asked of me. Well, a common consensus of opinion is that we move on to another plane, or we remain grounded, or we come back in visitation. Now, for those that remain grounded, it's partly through choice, and in fact most of it is through choice. They prefer to be closely allied to things that they recall in their lifetime, and the concept of moving into something new and different for them is much more of an anathema to them, and so they become frightened or reluctant to do so. I don't believe in any religion throughout the world as being the true voice of God, and logically it is pure simplicity. Christian faith has been going, 2,000 years. I think the Islamic faith just under that. Jewish faith has been going a lot longer. So let's look at religion. We are talking in a couple, maybe 3,000 years of development of a particular religion. So what existed before that religion? What God did they worship? And of course we know historically that prior to Christianity and Judaism and the Islamic faith, people tended to worship other gods. The Romans worshipped their own gods before being converted to Christianity. The Greeks worshipped their own gods. So I think really all religion is, to me, it's just a means of control over people's lives and minds. I think that the Bible and the New Testament is not the word of God, it's the word of man. It's man's understanding or trying to grasp the reality of what the paranormal is. And the only way they can come to a particular conclusion on that is to write it into their own scriptures of what they believe is the word of God, etc., etc., etc. But the problem is, of course, because it is the word of man, many of these things that are written in there are control mechanisms over people's lives, telling you how you should conduct yourself, what you should do in your life, and in some cases totally controlling your life, so your life becomes almost a ritual. So yes, I don't believe in organised religions, but having said that, I've been to Protestant Catholic churches, I've been to synagogues in the past, and some of the fringe Christian religions, and the spirituality is always the same. There is no difference. Wherever people go to worship God, there is always an energy. But my point is, the God that they're worshipping is this energy that is part of everything that we know around us. The whole world is generated by this energy. It's like a continuing circle. It completely expands and moves continuously. And we interact with that energy that's around us. Unfortunately, some of us haven't got our suits, and so to communicate and contact them on their level becomes problematic. But essentially, all energies are interconnecting, and all life on this planet is connected to each other. And I personally feel that that really is the true calling of God, what God is. We are all part of a greater energy, a greater awareness that exists beyond this level. Now, living in a logical world as we do, the actual notion of us dying and moving on to another plane is illogical, and I accept that. And that is what's so compulsive and so much more interesting about the paranormal, is the fact that you are actually engaging with something. which is, to all effect, impossible. But we know that it isn't impossible. We know that it does exist. Our only problem is communicating with it. And as I said earlier, hopefully with the advance in technology, in some years to come, that will change. One question that was asked from memory is, what was my religious background as a child? I was brought up in a family of atheists, really. I used to go to Sunday school, but I never really believed in it because it all seemed quite illogical to me, for the reasons that I've already explained to you. How can one religion be better than another? But one thing I do appreciate and admire, and this is from the Bible, is the Ten Commandments. I think that these were written as laws in an age of lawlessness as an abiding rule for everybody who follows or believes in that tradition. And of course it's those commandments which have gradually written themselves into law, and it's part of our laws today. So there is some good moral bargaining points to say on behalf of religion, but generally speaking, it causes far more trouble, far more strife, far more misery in this world than if it hadn't existed. I think in some ways, on a physical level, we'd be much better off. But spiritually, we wouldn't. We have to believe in something. We have to connect with this energy that some people call God and other people call spiritual power. So that's as far as I want to go with religion. I don't disrespect anybody that follows any particular religious ideal. I have no truck with people that would use their religion to cause harm or misery to others or to enforce their will upon others, in which case I view that kind of ideology in practice as being evil. And so, of course, I cannot subscribe or support it. But one thing I would like to tell you is that when you are connected truly with spirit, it is the most amazing experience. And I hate to sound, I apologise for saying this, but it's almost how I would describe it. It's when you're in full contact, it's almost like touching the face of God. This energy just flows through you. It's the most enlightening and uplifting experience you can ever have. And every single one of you can do it if you choose to do it. Another question people ask me, are there demons and are there angels? Well, angels and demons, again, have evolved from a religious context. I don't actually believe in either, but I do believe that in life there are good people and evil people. And I think that carries through to their spiritual period. And I think that evil people can be seen as icons of evilness, for example, as a demonic devil entity or some kind of giant spider. I mean, I've seen some weird and wonderful things on investigations, but that is not the work of demons, that is the work of man in spirit. I think that people that were kind, decent and generous throughout their lifetime appear in an almost angelic form because they are much higher and purer energy. And I think those that, shall we say, support more evil purpose, and there are quite a few of those people in this world, are a darker, sinister energy. And I think that in the world that we live in today, I think that evil is perhaps a lot more stronger than good. Whether it's always been that way, I don't know, but I can feel that this evil is starting to impact upon our lives. And so some of you, particularly when I'm on Facebook, accuse me of being political. But let's face it, at the end of the day, religion and politics, whatever you believe in, there is always a connect. But the one principle that guides me through my life is to try and do the right thing and to stand up and be counted for believing in principle to something that I believe is the right thing, regardless of what other people may feel. They may feel the complete opposite. But the important thing about my life is that I want to go through it without causing harm to people, without causing misery or loss, and to try and enlighten people. And that's what I'm hoping to do by sharing my work with you, which of course I do take great pride in. Another aspect of my work is healing. Now, healing in my case is hands-on. This came to me by chance some years ago. A girlfriend had bruised her knee and she was in pain, and I put my hand over her knee, as you do, and she said that she could feel tremendous energy surge from my hand going into a swollen knee joint, and within a couple of minutes the pain had completely gone. I thought that she was patronising me, and so what I decided to do was experiment with other people, and I suppose to a degree that's also helped my mediumship skills, and to the point that opening to spirit through healing has allowed me to go much more deeper than I had previously done so before. And it's kind of weird that on a few occasions when I practice hands-on healing, I can actually feel my spiritual self actually slipping out of my body, as it were, and travelling into their body. I never quite get there, but I do feel that slip, and I have to kind of pull myself back in there again. I can't describe it any more than that. It's a very, very strange sensation. But I discovered that through healing, it allowed me to become more aware of paranormal activity than I had done previously. People have asked me, coming back to investigation, what was my most scariest investigation? Well, I haven't had many scary, what I would call very scary. I've been overshadowed once, and the spirit on this occasion made me feel quite ill, and I actually felt myself, as I described to you about healing somebody and slipping away, I actually felt that same sensation, except I wasn't moving towards somebody else's body. I was actually being sucked completely out of my own body. That's how it felt. And as this process was happening, I could see the location I was in very clearly, and I could see walls changing and moving and different decorations appearing and disappearing. I felt that I was being dragged back into time itself. It was a horrible experience, but it was also compelling and fascinating. But I decided it was too risky, and I broke away. I've had a number of very good investigations which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I would say probably my favourite place to investigate is the haunted airfield. Now, people have asked me about current developments. Am I planning to go elsewhere with my work? And yes, I would love to do that. The problem is accessibility to locations. That can be a problem. And but I think that coming for 2011, with my work with Jason Figgis, the director, we're hoping to be able to move into much further afield, into more locations. Ireland for me is particularly interesting. There are many ancient buildings, mostly ruined, that are accessible. So perhaps we may do some investigations from there. For me, as I explained to you earlier, the more remote and the less accessible they are to other people, the likelihood of more activity is occurring. I think really I've more or less covered all the points that I wanted to discuss with you today. I'm very pleased that your support of my work is growing stronger, and certainly I hope to be able to expand my work, as I've said and described earlier, to a much broader audience through the medium of TV, but we'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, I thank you very much for tuning in and watching this, and I do apologise if I've gone on quite for a long time, and also apologise if I've actually missed any points that you raised, and for that I do apologise. But thank you.